Recording in progress.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see at least some people came in person. I know that's risky a little bit these days with the variant, so I really do appreciate you coming. It's a lot easier for us to at least address some warm bodies instead of an empty room. I want to also welcome everybody listening in on Zoom. We are so thrilled that you're with us, and we are so glad to have an opportunity to answer your questions and really share with you, hey Kenny, share with you what the financial situation is here in Clayton now, especially after COVID. And I shouldn't even say after, because it's actually still going and still affecting us and will for quite some time. I wanted to say, I want to run through the agenda, but for those participating by Zoom, if you will please submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And then we'll read your question aloud so everyone can hear it and provide a response at an appropriate time when we can stop and do so. Tonight, basically, like I said, we're going to our city manager and the finance director, so David Gibson and Janet Watson, will provide you with our budget, our projections for the coming year, and kind of what the trends have been really in terms of revenues and expenses and how we find ourselves where we are today. And then I'm going to take a few minutes and just address questions that have been commonly asked of me over the last month or so, just so we can just get that done. And then we really would love to hear questions from those listening on Zoom and from you here tonight. So with that said, I think I will turn it over to Janet Watson. Janet is our finance director and has been for a long time, and she's done a marvelous job all these years, and we love her. Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. How are you? We appreciate you coming. I'll share my screen. All right. So we'll go over some information about, this is mostly all about the general fund of the city. We get a little bit into the capital fund at the end, but it's mostly about the general fund. So the city's general fund has accounts with revenue expenditure, and it's really associated with all the traditional things that you think of as municipal government. It pays for personnel and commodities and contractual services. And obviously our areas are, we have public safety, police and fire, public works, parks and recreation, planning and development, administrative services, and solid waste collection. We mentioned solid waste collection because it's the largest item in our budget outside of personnel. Our fiscal year begins October 1st, so we're preparing our budget right now as a proposed budget that'll be presented to the Board of Aldermen soon, and it ends on September 30th. So this is just a general graph of the sources of our revenue. Since we're talking about a property tax proposal, we pulled that out. That's about 26% of our general fund revenue. Obviously, utilities and sales tax are the other two large parts of our revenue. Some of our sales tax goes into other funds. Some of our property tax goes into other funds for special purposes such as debt levies. So this is the property tax that supports the general fund. Then we have license permits and fees, and the biggest things in here are building permits and ambulance charges. There's a variety of items, any kind of permit that you pay. Maybe you need a some kind of permit for occupancy in your property. many areas, but the building permits and the ambulance charges are the largest. Then parking revenue is next at 8%. And that's just what you think. It is the meters, the money we get from the meters. And it is also, we have parking agreements with companies here in town and other entities, the county, to share parking revenue for services, and all of that money goes into that area. Then we have Parks and Recreation, and those are the fees you pay related to pretty much outdoor items. It does not involve the revenue that is received by the center of Clayton. It's really for the outdoor, it's the outdoor pool, sports, that kind of thing. And then fines, that would be municipal court fines and parking fines. And then we have a variety of special areas that come in from either the state or the county. And then we have a few grants. That's like gas tax and cigarette tax. Those are just shares of state taxes that we get. And then there's some other sources that's kind of miscellaneous information, miscellaneous revenue, interest, those kinds of things. So the property tax is the most stable revenue that we have. And the real and property taxes generate about $6.5 million annually for the general fund. The property taxes generate about $2 million for debt service, which is not in the general fund, and about $525,000 for the special business district. Our current operating levy, the amount that goes into the general fund, is 52 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. And the debt levy is 17.9 cents per $100 of assessed valuations for a total residential levy. Now the commercial levy is different, but the residential levy is 69.9 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So the city has had the same maximum property tax since 1991. It's at 81 cents of a levy, and there has been no increase to that general levy. Residents have passed 2 single issue property taxes in the last 10 years, and when the debt is paid on those, the debt service, the revenue then goes away on those. And that was in 2014, it was for some streets, alleys, and street lighting. And the other one was when we purchased the police building and renovated it for the new police station in 2009. And each year, the city performs an annual levy calculation, and we maintain the taxes at the maximum of the ceiling that we're allowed to by law, and that's within the city's authorization. But this is, sometimes it may go up from what it was the prior year, but that's more related to assessed values, development, those kinds of things. But it's not the same thing as a tax increase from voter approved tax increase. And the taxes are set each year. The Missouri State Tax Commission approves a consumer price index increase, a CPI increase each year, and that's how much new revenue the city can get. So they have already approved it for the 2021 budget, 2021 property taxes, which will be in our FY22 budget. And that's at 1.4%. So they determined that very early in the year, maybe February or March or something like that. And they determined that that's the 2021 amount. Then for future years, what we did on projections was assume a growth of 2%. It's been between 0.7% and 2.3% in recent years. It hasn't been very high in many years. And any large developments then would add taxes onto that 2% growth that we project. So this is the residential property tax bill that you would receive. It shows all of the entities, and we've actually summarized some of these because there are many types of property tax increases. For instance, the county has more than one rate, but this is the amount, and you'll see that the amount that comes to the city for general operations, residential is the 0.699 levy. And so of that 0.52, we talked about that, 52 cents for the general fund. The police building is 10.2 cents. And the 2014 bonds for this, mostly for streets, is 7.7 levy. So you can see that the city of Clayton is really a very, very small part of the tax bill that you receive. You can see these other entities, obviously the school district, and that's very, very typical that a school district would have a much higher rate than other areas because they are almost solely funded by property tax. So the effect of the 18-cent increase that will be on the August 3rd ballot is, this is an example, a residential home appraisal of $700,000. Their 2020 tax bill was $9,800. And the amount that came to the city was $692. So the cost of an 18-cent increase in the city levy would be an extra $239. So that is about a 2.4% increase in the total tax bill. The commercial properties have a slightly different breakdown in the taxes on their tax bill, but you'll see that the city, our rate is 0.794, and that's just still under 10% of the property tax bill. The special business district highlighted there also has a levy, and that is a small amount, 1.4% of the tax bill. And then you can see the division of that money that comes to the city and how it's used. So the effect on commercial properties is somewhat similar. We used a commercial property in this example of a $10 million valued commercial property. Their current tax bill was $317,000 to all entities. The part that came to the city would have been $19,520, and the cost of an 18-cent increase would be $5,760. This is a very large property at $10 million, as you can see. So we want to talk a little bit about how we budget. There's been some questions about surpluses and deficits, and so we wanted to kind of describe it. So what we do when we do our initial revenue projections for the next year is that we try to remain pretty conservative. You know, what you don't want is for revenue to come in less than you budgeted. And so we try to remain a little conservative on revenue projections. And then throughout the year, we work really hard to reduce any expenditures we can. We focus on that all year long, and that almost always happens. And so that has really historically led to some of the surpluses that we had. And we'll see a graph a little bit with our surpluses and deficits in just a moment. So we have had annual surpluses over years, and they have decreased over time because our expenditure growth outpaces our revenue growth. And that's the simplest description of our problem. Our revenues are never keeping up with the rate of expenditure growth. Surpluses in the last few years have really only occurred when we had staff vacancies or savings in some other areas during the year. And the city has made all possible cuts to contracts and commodities that we can. The only way to reduce expenditures any further going forward is to really cut personnel. 70% of our general fund budget is personnel. And so, and personnel equals services. And so there's really no way to do that but to reduce services if we have to make further cuts. So this is a history of the general fund, the revenue and expenditures. And I think this is pretty interesting. So you'll notice, this is Great Recession. And you can see that revenues were quite a bit higher than expenditures at the time. And then over time, the revenues fell as expenditures increased. And there's a couple of reasons for some of that. We bought the police building in, I believe, 2009, and we issued bonds. And then we went to the public and asked for a debt levy to pay for that bond issue. But what we said was we have a bond issue that's paying off in 2013, so we'll pick up those payments and we won't levy that money until after the other bond issue drops off, so that the property tax rate for residents and commercial properties didn't increase. And so you can see here, so this is where we bought the property, at the time, not really knowing probably what was going to happen to property values and all the things that happened during the recession. And so you can see that revenues are on a small, steady increase. But this is probably when we started that debt levy. But as you can see, the revenues fell quite a bit. Property values fell. You probably don't remember, but in those years, your assessed values likely actually fell over the course of 2 or 3 years. And so then the city started a project to eliminate the deficit. Sorry, realize the microphone's over here. To eliminate the deficit. We had a 3-year plan to eliminate the deficit. The first step was that we would pass a fire service sales tax, and that happened in 2014. The second step was that we offered a retirement incentive to current employees who were eligible for retirement. And we had, I think, 19 employees that took it, and we did not replace 8 of those positions. And so you'll see some of that reduction here is based on that. And then we went through our budget in its entirety and cut and cut and cut. Things like street sweeping and park maintenance and all kinds of things we just cut throughout the budget, which brought it to a balanced budget in 2014. And you'll see that the lines move back together. Then we've had some growth in revenue over those years. We had the fire service sales tax that I mentioned. I believe that started in 2014. And then in 2018, the county passed a public safety tax. Clayton voters voted on it, but as part of a countywide ballot issue. And so that added some revenue in, I believe, 2018. So you can see that we had some highs here in revenue. And in 2017, 18, and 19, we really had some dramatic building permits. If you think of all the new buildings that we have, most of that revenue came in 17, 18, and 19. And that really amounted to a few $100,000 a year, but it's not long-term revenue. And now those projects have paid those revenues, and so they'll gradually come on the tax rolls, and some of those are already on the tax rolls. Yes, we sold 2 parking lots, so we actually sold 2 parking lots. That money did not go into the general fund, but it allowed us to have some capital funding. So this graph shows a little more clearly the surplus and the deficits that have occurred. So you can see we were high in surplus in the late 2000s, and then we dropped into deficit, and we were there for a few years, and then we were balanced, and almost immediately our revenues were growing at a pretty good rate. You can think the economy was booming. We had lots of activity in the city during those years. And then in 2018, it actually is those are kind of the peaks of property, of the building permits and some other items that kind of peaked in that year. So if you looked at our 2018 and our 2019 budgets, I'm sorry, 2019 and 2020 budgets, the original budgets, we used to do the next budget year and 2 years in projections. And in both of those years, in those budgets, the future 2 years were always in deficit. We knew it was coming, and this was prior to the pandemic. We knew that those points were crossing and we would need to do something at some point. the pandemic brought that very forward very fast. And so we already knew that we were going to have a problem prior to the pandemic. So what was the effect of the pandemic? So during 2020, we really only had 6 months. If you think of our fiscal year, October to September, we really only had 6 months of the budget year that was impacted by the pandemic. The first half of 2020 was like a regular year. And then by 2021, has been and continues to be heavily impacted. We are still very low in many of our revenue areas. And then the future has a lot to do with office occupancy and the return to business travel, because that's where we get a lot of our sales tax. So through April, the city had lost 5.2 million in revenue since the beginning of the pandemic, and we're still losing revenue every month. We do have some federal grants that have come in. So last year, we received the CARES Act grant, received a little over $1 million, and that helped us not have deficit that year. And then there are new funds, ARPA, the Recovery Act funds, and we'll get money in the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. And we'll get a total of, I think, 3.1 million. But after that, it ends. And then when we look at the projections, I think you'll see that. So when the pandemic happened, the city was very quick to take immediate action. We sat down as a group and we went through line by line by line, where can we cut? Because we didn't know what was going to happen or how long it was going to happen. So we held positions vacant. We cut budget areas. We deferred any maintenance items that we could. And so we made substantial cuts. And if we wouldn't have made those cuts, there would have been a significant deficit, even with the CARES Act, the federal funds. So the current year original budget showed a 4% projected increase, but pandemic-related revenues have really been very slow. Many cities were affected very quickly and very hard. If you had a mall, those cities like that, or big box, but then when the big boxes picked up, then their revenues picked up, as everybody can remember where we all bought our products. But we don't have those. We're a very different city. Ours are mostly related to restaurant, travel, and leisure. So the fiscal year 2020 budget is now estimated to be down 1% from the prior year. We had used projections from before, but that we used our budgeted numbers. But now that we've gone through our budget process, and now we know where we believe we'll end up for 2021. We believe we'll be down 1% from the prior year. And without the one-time Recovery Act funds, we would have been down 3% from the prior year. All right, so we'll move to some projections. All right, so these are our new general fund projections. We're in 2021, so we're in this year through September. Now we know where we believe we are. We've included a lot of things in this from the last version. We added the Wayfair tax, which doesn't happen till out in 24, I think it is. There is a cable franchise fee rollback in that same legislation that passed the Wayfair tax, and we'll lose some funds there over the next 5 years. There's you may remember the state passed a motor fuel, a gas tax increase, and we will get a small piece of that. And so we've added that in. And then we have also added in revenue for any development projects that have been approved, and we can kind of estimate when those would come online. So these are our projections. We've added in the fund balance because it's hard to remember that, these are compounded, these deficits are compounded. And so this shows that over the course of several years, you can see that we are in deficit. We have the one-time federal funds here. And once those drop off, you can see we drop dramatically further into deficit. And we've used projections in here. As we talked, we've used a 2% on property taxes. I can't remember quite now what we used for sales tax. Oh, I can just look here. We did a 3% for 2023, and then we moved to a 1.5% just because we just don't know the future and what that holds. Utilities, our intergovernmental, we have the one-time grants. And then we also have a couple of transfers that come into the general fund. We have money from the special business district that helps fund events and other economic development activities. And then a transfer that comes in. We passed a use tax that is deposited into the capital fund. And we passed that so that we could transfer some different funds into the general fund so that we could hire an additional 6 firefighters a couple of years ago. And the reason is that we were below requirements on how many firefighters get to the scene. And of any city in the county, we believe we were one that because of the type of buildings that we have, that we needed to up that amount to the national standard. And then personnel, we have projections in for personnel, contractual services. We have pulled out the waste contract here because that has such a large impact on the budget. And then other items in the city. So if we add in the 2.1 million from the new tax, so today.
Really quickly, can you talk about the percentage of the fund?
Oh, yes.
The way it is before we add that.
Okay. I'm sorry. So you'll notice this very last line is the percentage of expenditures that are in that at the end of the year with the ending fund balance. So this is a percentage of annual expenditures. So if you had 50% fund balance, that means you could fund a half a year of expenditures should something happen. So you can see that starts dropping, and when those the federal grant drops off, you can see how quick it starts dropping. 62, 52. 42 down. So by 2026, we are at a 16% fund balance. Our goal for fund balance is a 25% fund balance, but we have a target of a 33% just for flexibility. But we obviously currently have about a 70%. I'll add in 2.1 million. That way we can see that change. So we were at a 16% fund balance. And this adds in 2.1 every year. And so you can see that we don't drop near as fast. We continue to drop, but it gives us a lot more time with that extra $2.1 million that would come in with the proposed tax. Still, yes, still beginning in 2023, every year in deficit, yes. So it is not a fix forever, that's for sure, but is a significant fix. Oh, I'm sorry. So we mentioned this capital transfer for operations. So that's money that's coming in from the capital fund. And if we take that out, because that would help then with the new tax, it could help the capital fund a little bit by $500,000. You can see that it drops even a little bit less. So basically of that $500,000 that we're transferring into the capital, or from the capital fund to the general fund, we would no longer do that, so that a portion of the new tax revenue, about that 500,000, could also assist with the capital fund. We have a very long list of unfunded capital projects, some of which are very large, and it helps us fund our ongoing. If you looked at our capital project list, it would be many items that you don't think of as new and exciting, like resurfacing streets and fixing the restroom at the park. But we do have a long list of items that we haven't been able to get to. Now we'll switch to the capital fund. Let's see. So the capital fund has quite a bit of fund balance. If you'll remember, we recently sold some properties, and so we had about $5 million of one-time revenue that came into this fund in FY 19 and 20. And that has really helped us fund projects for the next few years. We have a 5-year capital plan. If we didn't have that money, we would really be doing no projects at all, which is a very serious issue to defer maintenance that's needed on streets and facilities and that kind of thing. So you can see here that if you look at the ending fund balance here, we have a 5-year plan, and if we work that 5-year plan, that's through 2026. And then we just estimated projects from that amount on. We took the last 5 or 6 years and averaged that and came up with about $1.3 million, kind of, and then at a growing rate, obviously, because of cost increases over time. So you can see that in some years we have enough money, and in some years we're using our reserves. And so kind of dwindling that reserve. So if we took out that one transfer here, and I'm going to make it very simple, and I'm just going to use $500,000. And I think it grew at maybe 6%. So if we didn't make that transfer, we gained a lot of money. We gained $500,000 a year in growing in the capital fund, which would allow us to do more projects. All right, we will switch back. So we ended up I'll mention this too. We have a couple of items that pay off. You'll notice we go out and the fund balance is dropping, but then it begins to build. And that's because we have some debt that pays off. And then once that debt pays off, those funds could be used for other projects. All right, we'll go back to the. Hold on. Let's see. We have the center renovations are using sales tax, parks and stormwater sales tax, and it pays off in FY 28, and we have some bonds that pay off in FY 32. And in very round numbers, 500, 650,000, somewhere around each of those are about that amount. All right. I will turn it back over to the mayor to talk with some frequently asked questions that we've received.
I just want to say before, I think people weren't able to see the person speaking, people in Zoom, but I'm wondering, do you think they can see us now, or are they just going to see that? Because we don't really need that. actually to answer the questions.
Yeah, you
What's
can
gonna
go ahead and
happen?
Just stop sharing.
Stop sharing.
Could we also turn on the lights?
Yeah.
Stop share. Okay, so now what, will they see me?
Yes,
As
we're
I
gonna turn the
talk.
lights on.
Okay. Okay, great. All right. All right, so like I said before, I'm just gonna spend some time answering questions that have been asked pretty frequently, and then we'll go into any questions that you all have here tonight or for those on Zoom. The first one is, why is this being placed on the August ballot? I don't know if you had a chance to do your little timeline.
We did, we have a screen that shows that.
Okay, you want to put that up real quick
Okay.
for me? I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. But I'll go ahead and try to talk about it a little bit. We really didn't want to do this, this tax increase. We've kind of been kicking the can down the road for a couple of years now, and as Janet mentioned, COVID really accelerated the urgency of doing it. And yet, earlier this spring, what we did was we talked about our finances quite a bit in various public meetings. And, just the hard news was a pretty hard swallow. So we waited until we could find the latest possible sales tax numbers for spring. And also we waited to see the results of our survey, our citizen survey, because we wanted to understand particularly about waste, about trash hauling. How important was it that we continue the service that we have? And so, and how do people want to handle that? And so we got all those answers, and by that time it was May. And again, the writing was really clear on the wall. So we did then meet, we did then meet on May 18th. As you can see up there, we met on May 18th, and we talked about, again, what we should do. We decided that we should consider putting a measure on the ballot. And then we also knew at that point that in order to actually have it on the August ballot, we would have to make our decision by May 25th. And so our meeting before that was May 21st. So all of those meetings were public, and the financial planning meetings leading up to those decisions were public. They were all posted as usual on our website, and also anybody who is signed up. And if you're not signed up, I really want to encourage you to be signed up. I know Rick is signed up. I don't know if any of the rest of you are, but you can sign up on our city website and you'll receive whatever, all the things you want to receive. You can check the boxes, agendas for our meetings, agendas for plan commission meetings, you name it, whatever you want to receive, the e-newsletter, you'll get it. And that's the greatest way you can stay informed. So this was, yes, a short timetable, but we felt like we had to be decisive because we were in sort of an urgent mode now with our budget and looking forward, as Janet just said, in terms of being faced with reductions in our reserves and deficits going forward. We just, and also probably, limitations on the maintenance that we could do in the city. We just felt like it was imperative to act now. The reason we picked August, again, it was imperative to act now, but also we have another election on the ballot already. So the city is already footing the bill for an election in August. And we have our person who's going to be on the ballot with us tonight, Gary Fader. So if you'll recall, or you may not have known, but last year we lost one of our aldermen, Dan Sokol, very sadly, very suddenly. So this election is really to put someone in that seat. So we're already there. We do have an urgent need. And why don't we wait till November? Unfortunately, this year, it's an odd number year. There is no general election in November. We could do a special election, but then we would be the only thing on the ballot. And actually, at least this time, we have an aldermanic election, and we also have the St. Louis Community College election on the ballot. So it made sense to us to go ahead with August. Another question that has been asked is, why has the city approved tax abatement for developments and now come to the voters for increased property tax? Well, those developments that required or were given abatements were sort of one-of-a-kind developments, I will say. The only projects in Clayton that currently have an abatement on them are the Centene Towers and the 212 apartment building. The 212 apartment building was the very first residential, major residential building in downtown Clayton after probably a long time of lacking of development that way. And we had set as a strategic goal many years ago that we wanted residential in the downtown because everyone loves retail, everyone wants vitality and activity, and really the way to get it is to have people living in the downtown. So this particular project was kind of the cornerstone or the launch pad for all that activity, which has followed on amazingly. We now have several apartment buildings and we have more to come. And so it really did provide a catalyst for that kind of economic activity. So it was a pretty good deal. And then, of course, the Centene campus is a huge project. It was a special development district. And yes, it did require an abatement. Unfortunately, as at this point, they have forfeited most of that going forward, but they still have their new tower. And really, when you think about it, I can tell you the amount of the abatement in 2020 was $167,000 that we didn't capture, I guess. And the Centene project will add an estimated $150,000 that we won't capture. But when you think about the magnitude of what we need, and you also think about the magnitude of what will be delivered by those buildings in terms of economic activity, including improved property values and a much bigger increase in taxes, it's really kind of it's definitely a win for the city. Let's put it that way. It's really offset in a major way. It significantly outdoes the amounts of those abatements. Why didn't the city hold the community forums prior to the decision? Well, I think I've told you the timeline. And I think if you understood that timeline, you could recognize that there just wasn't an opportunity for that. And I will say, personally, take the heat. I wish we could have gotten this one done sooner, like right after or in the couple of weeks following. We weren't able to do it. And one of the reasons is because we really did want to show some more accurate projections for next year. And we weren't able to get those without some information going in. Is everything okay?
There might be some issues with the video.
Oh.
For Zoom.
For Zoom. Oh, no. Okay. Should I pause for a sec? Let you go at it?
Yeah, I think we're all set.
Okay. All right. Very good. Could they hear me though? Oh, okay. That's the important part. Okay. All right. So that was the forum. Is the city going to use Prop A revenue to rebuild the ice rink? No. The capital plan, we reviewed the capital budget, capital improvement budget. We just approved a new 5-year capital plan at our last board meeting, and some of you were listening in. We have a pretty long list of what I would call maintenance projects, street repairs, et cetera, in that plan, but there are no major projects in it. Why? Because we simply can't afford to do them. We cannot afford to take out a bond for any major project, which is what we have to do to finance something as big as the ice rink, or we have a couple other things that we'd really, our street lights really need a lot of attention. That's millions of dollars. So anything of that magnitude, the city usually takes out a bond at very low interest rates because we are AAA rated. And And then we pay it back over time with sales tax revenues that are already coming in. And we know that we can afford it, looking at our budget and looking at our operating expenses. But as has been described, our sales tax revenues have been decimated by COVID, and they are not going to come back soon. I read in the paper all the time, much to my dismay, that while restaurants are coming back pretty well now, hotels, especially for business travel, are not going to for quite some time. And I saw a projection that maybe by 2024, they would start to come back. And we have a lot of hotels in Clayton, and that is really a huge chunk of our sales tax revenue. And that is the revenue we need to do some kind of major project. You know, unless something changes, you won't see any activity there for quite some time. Just to mention too, that ice rink project is a project that, if it ever does get reactivated, will really depend not only on that revenue, but private funding, which we have already raised a significant amount of, and is just sitting there in case we decide to go forward, and also some significant grant money that we know it would be available for it. So you won't see that for any number of years unless something changes, and we definitely do not include any of those projects in our current capital plan. We see no avenue for funding it at this point. Would Prop A revenue be used to solely preserve the rear yard waste collection program? No. That waste collection program is in our budget, as you can see, and we need to evaluate going forward how we want to handle trash. We are the only city in the region that provides rear yard pickup free to its residents. And we are also the only city in the area that provides multifamily, and I'm talking about bigger than 10 units, big buildings. We're the only one that provides that to our property owners and residents free. So it comes at a high cost. Our total trash bill is about $2 million a year. What should we do? I don't know. We're going to have to talk about it. We're going to have to talk about it with you all and among ourselves, and we're going to have to have some public engagement, because is this something that we really want to keep up? We did, like I said, wait around for the results of the survey to see what, and we asked the question, how important is it to you? Very important. How do you want to handle it? Do you want to contract with haulers yourself? Do you want the city to still take care of it? Well, we want the city to take care of it. So we realize that people like things as they are. And so we're going to be striving to figure out how we can maintain that. I asked someone, I've been asking people just ad hoc about how they feel about trash, on dog walks or whatever. And people, a couple of people said to me, rear yard trash. I thought that was the reason to live in Clayton. So, I think it's a valued service, and we need to decide if that's who we want to be going forward. Then there's a couple more. Why doesn't the city account for high inflation on the revenue side when projecting future budget years? Well, we account for inflation on the revenue side by using the CPI index that the tax commission gives us. And that is what we are bound by. So we just heard that the one that we're going to be using for the present is 1.4%. That's the consumer price index that we've been told is what we're going to be able to use to calculate our tax rate, up or down for the coming year. If inflation happens and we end up with a 5% CPI, I'm sure that we will eventually, the taxing commission will change their estimate, and we'll have a new estimate to use and a new actual boundary. That's all we can take, is whatever they say. And so, if that happens, okay, that sounds great, doesn't it? We can increase our rate by 5%, but, or we can take 5% of the growth that happens in value. But we have to understand that our expenses will grow by at least that much as well. And our costs historically, as you've heard, grow at about 4% a year. 4% a year, you know, when you consider that what's driving that is people, 70% of our cost. What's driving that? Health insurance, pensions, and some salaries. And we always keep our salaries in total at nothing more than about a 3 to 3.5%. So those other costs are really driving that 4%, and those are costs that we really can't control. So when we say that we can only capture 2% of the growth, or 2.5%, or 1.4%, you can see how quickly those lines are going to diverge. So over time, I mean, I think our staff has done an incredible job over years and decades of keeping us trimmed down wherever they can all along the way, so that we don't end up deficit spending, except in those extreme times like the recession, or like now post-COVID, and going forward, what we will have if we don't take some action this August. So that's the answer to that. Also, well, one other point is that, what am I doing? Am I messing
Just
it
pulled
up?
up the calculator for you.
Okay. Oh, I don't need it. I'm not going to calculate anything. Well, I might.
That's the next question.
Okay. He's keeping me organized. Some of our revenues do not respond to inflation. So for example, parking, which is a good chunk of our revenue, parking fees. Parking fees are set at $1 an hour or whatever it is. And we don't change those with inflation. We just change those every couple decades or so. Also, application fees and permits, where you saw that big spike on the graph a while back, those don't change with inflation. It's a set fee. Utility tax is something that all cities get, and it's a pretty decent chunk of revenue as well. And it doesn't really travel with inflation. Utility rates are rates that are set by the utilities, but usually it's after a lot of consternation and sometimes public voting. So those don't change very frequently. So all those things, all those parts of our revenue aren't going to go up with inflation. That just further compounds the problem. Last question. How do I calculate the amount that I would pay if Prop A were to pass? So there's been a little bit of a misconception out there floating around that what everyone pays on their personal property tax in total is going to go up 35%. And you heard the explanation earlier, that's not the case. What's going up 35% is the city of Clayton's tax rate. So obviously 18 cents on 52 cents, 35% increase. But when you perform the calculation on your own home, you'll find you're not just taking that 18 cents per hundred and multiplying it by your total appraised value, what you think you can sell your house for or your condo for. You've got to use what the county uses, which is 19% of that value. So once you do that calculation, if you think you can sell your home for $750,000, you've got to only use 19% of it to calculate what your incremental property tax will be. So you'll use that and you'll divide it by 100 and multiply it times 18 cents. And that's how you get to the 256. So it's not a no-brainer. Recently, not now, but a few years ago, I found out about this assessed rate and how that formula works. I don't think people know that. I wouldn't expect them to know that. So it's a logical leap of faith to just say, oh, I'm just gonna do, divide it by 100 and multiply it times 19, but that results in a huge tax increase of thousands of dollars usually, and that's not correct. So What you find is that for, no matter what the value of your home is, this is going to be a 2.5% increase on what you currently pay in total property taxes. So that is a lot better than, 35%. So, all right. So I think now it's time that we could take some questions from you all, or if we have questions building up on Zoom. Yes, hi.
In my building, you almost need a small truck to carry the packages in the vestibule to the inside of the building. Amazon. Are we collecting tax?
Are we collecting taxes on deliveries? Oh, on Amazon sales, yes. Amazon, yeah, they're big enough, they utilize, they give everybody their sales tax. They account for it, yes. Is that rising? Is that rising? Tax from Amazon? You
Sorry, I've been battling laryngitis, but Amazon, as an example, is a tricky one because Amazon has a physical presence here within the state of Missouri. So anything you buy from Amazon that's shipped from a warehouse in St. Peter's or Hazelwood or another place, those cities are actually considered the point of sale and will collect tax on it. So using online shopping, internet shopping as an example, the Wayfair tax that was mentioned by Janet a while ago that will go in place in a few years, that will allow us to start to capture those from retailers that don't currently collect like the way Amazon does. But Amazon's kind of an outlier because of their physical presence within the state of Missouri.
But not everything ships from St. Peter's.
Correct, but they do ship a lot.
St. Peter's is doing well.
So that tax money stays in that local community.
So, yes, but what we're anticipating is, and what we've heard is, when the Wayfair tax collection actually starts in a few years, it's probably going to be about 30 to 40% of what we currently collect on the use tax. We get about $1 million a year in use tax. So we're anticipating when we receive the full revenue, when that goes into place, we're probably looking at an increase of $300,000 to $400,000 a year in internet sales tax to the city. Hopefully that answers the question. It's more of a broad look than just the one retailer.
Okay, good.
I
Yeah.
apologize for this.
Kenny,
What about the Clarendale project? Clayton Roads, how much would that be?
Oh, can you repeat the question?
the Clarendale.
If you
Oh,
just
I'm
repeat the
sorry.
question.
Yes, it was asked, excuse me, guys. It was asked, how much tax revenue will the Clarendale, which is the new high-rise at Hanley and Clayton Road, bring in annually? How much increased property tax to the city? Do we have an estimate of that?
Not just property tax.
Oh.
Sales, utility.
Okay, there won't be any sales tax to speak of. I think they're gonna have a little coffee bistro, but there would be perhaps utility tax and also property tax. Any
Right.
ideas?
I hate to say this off the top of my head, I think it's about 100,000.
So there isn't any tax
I
that
think it's
if
almost
people are
half.
spending
Oh, I'm
Let's see if I
sorry.
can pull it up. That's
Okay.
monthly, if they're paying monthly rents to them, is there any
Thank you.
tax that we receive from that?
I'm sorry, we had calculated that. I was thinking of a different project. It's about 52,000 in property taxes annually. Obviously, they would have utilities. It's very hard to judge what their utility increase would be. And what was the other question?
What is their business model? Do you get any money from their leasing or anything?
No, oh, no.
No, that's not taxed in any
And
way.
that won't, those revenues won't begin until it's occupied. So right now, it's still
Yeah,
working
I think
on the
it'll come on
building.
the tax rolls, I believe, in 2023. It has to be completely finished. A residential property has to be completely finished by January 1st of a year, and then we get it the following fiscal year.
Thank you, Brad. I came in late and I apologize. I think these discussions, it's always hard to know how transparent it is. It's coming from this point of view, and I'm pretty comfortable understanding municipal sales tax and that kind of thing. August ballot versus November, April, it's a separate percent each of this to be successful.
We didn't hire a marketing firm, and no, there's no difference. The question was, did we hire a marketing firm to help us put this presentation together? And secondly, is there a difference in the, vote requirement to pass between August, November, or April? And it's my understanding it's just a simple majority for all three.
The approval rate's the same. Voter turnout is typically a little bit better in April than it would be in August, but there is no November general election this year.
So
Those-
in general, a survey is often put out before you have projected tax levy before the voters. So I'm assuming the city was thinking the same way with the survey. So use that data to help support what we're going to do. So I haven't been in these city meetings, but I would only imagine when the survey was put out, how much of that was put out, the thoughts on this process. And I think when the community said, was there public input? I assume that's when the time that started. So I mean, me as a resident thinking, I would not. So I guess who did the survey? That was not part of all.
Well, we did the survey, and I forgot the name of the firm.
ETC.
ETC did it. They've done it for years. It's the survey we've done for years. We used to do it annually, then we cut back, we do it every other year. And one of the main reasons to do it is really to keep that ongoing tracking of how our city is performing on key city services. That is the key reason. And sometimes from year to year, we will put a question in. It was something we're wondering about. And as you can see, it's great to have community forums to get input, but the best way to get a lot of widespread input is through a survey. And so this year, our kind of special question, if you will, was about trash. And I don't know if you were here when we talked about that tonight. Okay, well, we talked about that, and what we learned from the survey is that people really like things the way they are, and that they really don't want to be the ones contracting with the hauler, like, for example, they do in Ladue.
I agree. Last question. Looking for opportunities for revenue, I think the city of St. Louis, the University City, is payment in lieu of taxes. Clearly, we provide a lot of resources to Washington, what has been thinking on that topic specifically?
Well, historically, we have talked to WashU over the years unsuccessfully in terms of a pilot. I'm not aware that they're giving a pilot to any city in the area. They do.
I think like you read the paper, you see a couple of money for extra police officers.
Yeah, they're so.
St. Louis is getting direct funding, so I think
Yeah, so WashU has been a very good partner to us on a number of things, and so I would fully expect that to continue. Yeah.
We do have an agreement with Washington University for fire services. They said much of their campus sits in an unincorporated area, and some of it sits in Clayton, some of it sits in the city of St. Louis. And so we do have a contract, but it's really a contract for services to provide that, and for they provide assistance to our fire department medical area, but it isn't really a payment in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, sorry about that. Forgot about that.
How is ARPA calculated? Because we're getting less than 1% of what the St. Louis area is allocated. The
What
federal
is
allocation for St. Louis for ARPA for 2021 is around $440 million. And we're showing a projection of 3.1 million. Why is that so low?
But ARPA, it was very interesting how they did it. They went with what they call entitlement cities and counties. So if you were 50,000 or more, you got a direct percentage. And then the rest of us all fell into non-entitlement areas. And then that was divided based on a variety of issues, but we didn't have any control about how much we received. We wish we would have, but we don't. Areas that might have higher poverty areas would have received more.
That's the city of
that.
St. Louis's allocation. Other questions from you all? Are there any questions coming in on Zoom?
You two have one.
Yeah, we just received one. And Janet, this one was on contractual services for next year. I know you had just looked that up. Trying to pull up that. It was asking-
I'll read the question.
I was
Why,
asking about the
why is contractual services increasing 500,000 next year?
Well, that is a great question because I saw the same thing. David saw the same thing and I did look it up. So basically in 2021, when we were budgeting for 2021, that was a year ago now. We were, in the midst of depth of the pandemic. And so when we budgeted for 2021, we cut back a lot. There was no travel and training, any contractual services we could cut, we would. I did look at that increase. And it's putting some travel and training back for our employees. There'll be conferences in the future that didn't occur in the last year or more. It was events. We had taken all the money out. We reduced the budget by we had no events in 2021. And so that money is back in. We cut a lot of things that we did with employees, recognition and those kind of things. We didn't have anything like that over the last more than a year. And we put some of that back in. And the rest were kind of normal growth in areas, street improvements, tree trimming and, they got a grant, $20,000 grant, a couple of items in the police department. And that's really basically most of the cost that
I was looking at a few other examples. A lot of things labor related are going up because the cost to get, in order to be competitive, hire people, you have to continue to pay more. So all of our labor contracts for things like mowing, lifeguarding is going up almost $35,000 next year. So all those types of contracts where we go out and get those particular services, we're seeing massive increases really across the board. So that's contributing a lot to that number.
Do you have a projection on the abatements rolling off? I mean, I'm curious too about your numbers. Michelle, you said like 120, 160 grand of, what we would have recovered without the abatement with Centene. The Centene's total abatement proposal was worth about $75 million. And so when I do the $75 million and I allocate that across the 20 or 25 year deal, I'm not coming up with 100. It seems like it's a little small. So what are we actually losing with Centene? And since they're not going to hit their milestone for the amphitheater and those get forfeited, what's coming back and when is it coming back?
So when they talk,
Repeat the question, the Centene tax.
so the question is with Centene, what is the real cost of how much the city is losing during that abatement period? You must have looked some documents up originally when the development agreement was done, and you said it was 75 million. But that would be all entities, not just us.
All 5 phases.
No, but that would be
But all taxing
So
entities.
we're only 10% of that
So
total.
we're 10% of that.
Yes,
total amount.
yes. And so all the other taxing entities area, including the school district, would have less revenue during those years.
So what's our positive impact of those roll off?
What's whatever the abatement is right now.
We said it was 167 or something.
Yeah, so we're
160.
losing that annually and we would get that back at the end. Let's see, the
20 years.
first one rolls off in 28, 29,
Yeah.
30, somewhere in there. And then this one would roll off, I can't remember exactly what year it started, maybe
20 years from now.
18, so a little less than 20 years.
Yeah, and what we can do is, on the website, there's a frequently asked question section under Prop A. What we'll do is, because I want to make sure we get it right, let me take a look at that document. We'll give you the exact years and the amounts, and we'll post it there. So,
Because the abatements are a big thing, right? Because the board votes on the abatement, but then when we get in trouble, it goes to the voters, right? So it makes us feel like we're in first, right?
But you do understand
No,
that the balance of what comes in total versus what you are losing on an abatement is like this.
No, I
Okay.
do understand that, but it's always a question, right? It's easy.
It's like the but for.
It's kind of like it's easy to come asking for money later when we decide it wasn't a good idea. is how.
We haven't decided it wasn't a good idea.
Well, no, I'm just saying this from a voter perception,
Oh,
you know, because abatements are always, we always struggle with abatements or tips or, you know, it's
We-
never popular with the community.
yeah.
So we don't put those to a vote. So I think it's good to have that stuff in the FAQ. Because the reason I'm here tonight is quite frankly, Prop A hit the books with, if you would have gone to the Alderman meeting, you'd understand why we're doing this. That's how it comes across when I go to the webpage, right? There's really no data out there. And when you have data dorks like myself that need to see it and understand it,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a no, because there's no data. You know, I wish I had a nickel to go towards sales tax for every time you mention the trash contract,
Mhm.
right? That's a $2 million contract.
Yeah.
Our number one deal is salaries though. And I didn't see a single thing in the data that talks about what have we done to cross-reference and correlate what Clayton's salary buckets are relative to our partners in Ladue and our partners in Kirkwood and Webster. You know, in the business world, I have to show every dollar that's spent, whether it comes from irrespective of the revenue source, and I have to correlate it to a competitive force. And we're not doing that on our number one expense bucket for the city.
Well, we do
We're
it.
talking, I know you say you do it.
Yeah, so we can
Sure.
easily put that up
Yeah.
there, but I can just tell you off the top of my head, just our target for our employee base is to be at the 60th percentile. So kind of right in the middle in the region.
That's good. I
And
mean,
that's where we've been
yeah.
for years.
60% of salary compensation.
Well, salary for sure, but I think total comp, but
Well, you know, we share some areas of benefits. You know, we're all in a health insurance plan together. So that, you know, those benefits are very similar city to city. But we do, every 4 years, we do a compensation benefit study. And we pick cities that we believe we're comparable to. And we look at those cities in every position, and
That's
it's
what we need.
market-based.
That's what we need out there on a website, not you should have gone to Alderman meetings, right? That's the kind of
The
data.
other thing too is, we're happy to share that information. We're still compiling as well what everybody's doing. There's a lot of July 1 cities, so everybody's fiscal year is different. A lot of those are July 1 cities. Some of our neighbors just had 4 and 5% increases for their salaries this year. So, no, I'm just saying, so we could put all that data together, but that is something as we were talking about Prop A, we started to put that website together, those were still unknowns because those cities hasn't adopted their next fiscal year budget. So those are things it's readily available.
Yeah, we thank you for that suggestion.
And then what's where's our lost revenue? The 5.2 million you cited lost revenue. I'm guessing that's all sales tax.
Oh,
Or,
no.
I mean events. I mean,
That's kind of what makes us different. We don't make any money on our events. That's kind of what makes us different than other cities. The question was, of the 5.2 million that we lost, you know, was that just sales tax? And so we have sales tax, but we have all other kinds of things, such as, you know, even down to ambulance fees. You know, we had less ambulance transports during that time. We had utilities were lower because the buildings weren't full. The parking revenue, people weren't parking. The Parks and Recreation fees, interest has tanked. Everyone knows that. Interest has tanked. So on the fund balance that we do have, we get very little revenue. It's a variety of issues, court fines, just many areas that are lower and that are just struggling to come back.
Sarah.
What is the city doing about economic development? I know this is a really hard time to talk about economic development with the pandemic, but I live just across the street from downtown Clayton, and we look like a dying city. You know, there's a lot of, we look like a dying city. There's so many empty buildings down there, and there's empty buildings other places in the city, and I know it's a hard time to talk about economic development, but what is being done?
So we actually, sorry.
Maybe we'll repeat the question.
Yeah, if you could.
The question is, what is the city doing about economic development? There are a number of empty buildings in downtown.
So we actually had a meeting with the business community yesterday, the mayor and I did, talking about this very issue. And when you're talking about a lot of the vacancies, what you're referring to is retail space. The challenge that Clayton has with retail is the value of those properties and the rents per square foot to go into those particular spaces. It's very, very, very expensive to rent at market rate retail frontage in Clayton. You look at a lot of the, people like to talk about mom and pop type shops and small boutiques, those types of things that you see populate areas like Maplewood, for example, along Manchester. But if you compare the rates per square foot, the rent with what you have to pay in Clayton, it's a totally different ballgame. So finding people to come in, first of all, is a challenge. And we have an economic development director that works very hard at that. But in the end, if there's any little blip, if there's any little hiccup, those are the things you see close first. So within the last year, you saw Mayana, Pickleman's, and all these other places. Central looks that way because it's about to be redeveloped on that half block. But a lot of these smaller places that relied on lunch service and that type of thing, we lost nearly all of them. If you try to go get a fast lunch somewhere in downtown Clayton right now, there's really only 2 or 3 options that are left. So the pandemic certainly made that worse, but the biggest battle is with rents. And so the question that they keep having is there any way the city can assist? What can be done there? And it's just tough. It's really it's a market problem, and we're working on those things, but it's not, reach out to retailers and they'll come or anything like that. The price per square foot is just incredibly high.
We do have a program that we instituted a few years ago for small businesses. If they move into a retail address and it needs to be, instead of a retail store, it needs to be outfitted with a kitchen, or it's it doesn't meet fire code, doesn't have the sprinklers, whatever. If we have a sales tax rebate, if they want to invest and bring that up to what will meet their needs, then we will rebate their sales tax for a year, I think up to $50,000. We haven't ever had anyone take advantage of it, but I hope someday we do. But the rents are just really tough for small businesses to do.
$35 a foot probably. I mean, on the older buildings.
Yeah, right now I couldn't even tell you. Yeah.
But
And all of that is in flux because there's so much. There's a lot of transition in downtown Clayton right now. I think somebody had asked about marketing, that sort of thing. One thing we want to do, it's not really marketing related, but a market analysis. It probably won't be for another year or two, but once the dust settles a little bit, trying to figure out what's the future of what we have downtown. How much retail could we really have? How much could we expect on the office side? What kind of vacancy rates are to be expected over the next few years? What's the demand for hotels? The type of stuff that we have. Very unique city. I mean, we're the only one around that has the mix of uses we have within that highly urbanized area. But there's a lot of uncertainty with that type of development. So that's something that we're going to explore more over the next couple of years. But to spend the money on the study right now, there are too many unknowns to make it effective at this point. They would really be guessing. But it's a huge priority for us. I mean, that's the engine for the city. When you talk about how did we lose all that money over that short period of time, it's because of downtown is shut down, which is what happened with the pandemic. Everything kind of grinds to a halt. I mean, the property tax for the residential areas is great, but really our engine is the sales taxes, the parking. It's everything that comes with downtown and all the activity in those buildings and everybody flying into Clayton to meet with the people that are in those offices. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
Right. You think about those 50,000 people that will spend each weekday here, and they're not eating lunch, they're not staying for dinner, they're not paying parking meters, they're just gone. That was devastating, really, to our budget.
You touched on some, Janet. Your numbers tell a story that my concern is this is a stopgap. I mean, we'd have to do this every 3 years. I mean, I'm not good with numbers, but I mean, just looking at your spreadsheet and I'm trying to calculate the run out over 15 years, and it's not sustainable to ask for an 18-cent bump every 3 or 4 years. So I guess
no doubt. There's work that's gonna there's other work that's gonna have to be done. We see those numbers and those projections going that way, and and the board put a lot of thought into putting this on the ballot. Like you said, it's not necessarily, we don't really view it as a stopgap, but an area that we really needed to shore up because it is our stable revenue stream. And that's really what was pointed out with this whole thing is we've got a lot of volatility in the revenue lines that we depend on. And sales tax, since 1991 has fallen from 81 cents down to 52. So it's just recovering some of that stability.
Right, I think there is a lot of work that we can do in terms of reconfiguring some of the things that we do spend money on, but also diversifying our sales tax base. That is something that I think that just my thought, haven't had a big meeting about it, but it should be a goal for the city of Clayton because we were hit really hard because all our eggs are in one basket. And so we need to protect ourselves from that. So there might be, other ways of moving forward that besides just property tax increases. That's what we're hoping. And we hated to, we just felt like this was the most we should ask for. This is the minimum amount we need to get us going and keep our reserves at a really strong level for the foreseeable future. That was one of the major goals, and this accomplishes that.
There are some other questions.
Oh, there's more questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Excuse me. Okay. Can Clayton divert the installation of the bike paths to offset the estimated 1% revenue loss? I'm not sure what the 1% revenue loss refers to.
And if this is a reference to the Maryland Avenue project, that's actually in the capital fund and not the general fund. But it's also a federally funded project. We've got grants from the federal government for that. So it's a project where if you have federal money coming in, you essentially have to do the project if you want to receive federal money, going forward. They program all that out. So that's something we have to move forward with. But even if we said, no, we don't want your money, we're not going to do it, we're going to save what we put into it. That's all in the capital fund. It wouldn't help the general fund at all. So.
You indicated that your budget goal was to have approximately 30% fund balance expense ratio. With the 35% proposed property tax increase, it should read property tax rate increase. That ratio would be close to 70% or more. Would it have been better to propose a lower increase, which would result in a more realistic ratio and closer to your stated 30% goal? I'm going to comment on that goal because it's not actually our ultimate goal to get down to 30% reserves. When I first joined the board, we had 100% reserves, and that is probably too much. But honestly, I think just the general feeling is that because of who we are and the kind of services we maintain and we have a big downtown and lots of tall buildings, we really need to be really extra safe and secure with that reserve. So I honestly don't ever really want to see it go below 50%. And I don't know what my fellow board members would say. We haven't had a big discussion about what that goal should be. I think, maybe what Janet was meaning, that you don't want to go below 25 or 30% ever, because then you're really in risky territory. And that is kind of an industry-wide kind of rule of thumb.
I'd like to address that 35%. I think there's some confusion
Thank you.
that we're asking for a 35% total revenue increase. It's only at 35% of the property tax that we receive in the general fund. So that percent doesn't have anything to do with the fund balance percentage. You wouldn't add to the fund balance. So it's only, I can't remember, 20-some% of our revenue would increase by that 35%.
Which again is the 2.5% increase for the individual property owner. The Parks and Rec expense was high in 2019, understandably low in 2020, but ratchets up more significantly. Why? I think that's going to be because we're starting our programs up again, but you can tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah,
Because we just canceled everything.
when we think of recreation, sometimes we think of the center here, but these revenues would not be at the center. So our outdoor activities, if you want to think of sports leagues, those kind of activities have camps, those kind of activities have really come back quicker. And we think that'll increase even more next year. So that's why that growth in the parks and recreation, including, you know, more people at the pool and all those outdoor activities, people seem to really be energized by those.
Okay, thanks.
Say something, Bridget.
I was just, and we're also doing a parks master plan. I mean, that's right. So
Oh, and we're also going to do a parks master plan,
Although that's being paid for out of the capital.
but it's in the capital fund. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm repeating everything so
No, that's
everyone
okay.
can hear.
It is a good one.
What is Clayton doing to change the model to attract small retail business? Oops. Why not offer a rebate to attract small businesses? Well, maybe, you know, we did mention that we do have a sales tax rebate in place for businesses that need to do some rehab on their location. And what we are doing to change the model, I mean, you know, unfortunately, government can't really, it's very hard for us to make it possible for the rent to be lower. I guess we could, you know, the only way we would do it is, you know, again, if we were to give a tax abatement on a development so that they could provide low rent to their retailers, I guess that might be a convoluted way to do it, but that's not what we want to do. And it's up to these developers and property owners to lease out their space. That's their job. And so it's up to them to put something there that'll be successful and able to pay the rent. And I know in a lot of cases, especially this past year, those property owners and landlords have lowered the rent, made the rent free for a while. They've really tried to work to save those little businesses so they can stay. And I think they've been successful in a lot of cases. Oh, there's one more, okay. Does Prop A assure that citizen expectations for services will continue to be met as been our history in our community? I think, yeah, more or less. That's why we're doing it. Does that mean we'll never change anything? We reconfigure our trash contract to be more economical for us all. We don't think it's a particularly good contract, so we're gonna work on that. That's gonna take a few years to figure out. Yes, the whole point of doing this is to keep services at the same high level that we have them now. And if it, you know, so if it doesn't pass, yes, those levels will be reduced. But if it does pass, it should be business as usual. Any other? Oh, there's one more. Oh. Does Clayton receive dollars from the St. Louis Art Fair? If so, is that estimate factored in the budget? I can tell you that we do get a little sales tax, but it does not offset what we spend in manpower helping them put the fair on. Our police and our public works folks do spend a lot of time, a lot of extra hours doing that, and the cost to us is really kind of, it's a negative on the bottom line for the city. But we value the fair.
Get a lot of sales tax from all the people buying the restaurants.
Yes, but we don't, I don't think it's a net positive for us. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing about that is it's very hard to measure exactly what you could allocate or, you know, say was the result of the art fair.
But we do it because it's exactly the kind of thing that builds excitement downtown and helps bring in small businesses and that sort of thing. There's a lot of residual things that are difficult to actually quantify.
So would somebody have gone out to eat anyway? Yeah, we don't know. Cheryl.
I noticed this is being recorded. Will this be available for citizens to see in the future? And if so, how are you going to post that it is available?
Good question.
Yeah, so it's going to go out everywhere. It's going to go, it'll be posted on our website, the link, but then we'll drive people to it on social media in the Clayton Connections newsletter that goes out. We're going to put it out everywhere. We put out every, you know, the rest of our information. So it'll be
And
out there.
I think we talked about doing a special e-blast about it. And so if you're signed up on our website to receive our newsletters and different things, you would get that. So if you're not signed up, I hope you'll go and do that. It's very easy. The front page of the website upper right, connect. That's all you have to do. And then you fill out the form. Any other questions or comments from this group?
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for coming. It's a lot of detail, but it's really important. And this is the accurate information that you ought to be looking at. And I hope you'll share with your neighbors and friends that this is where they can go to get the information they need. And to listen to this session would be great. Also, any of us and our alderman here, Rich Lentz, is in Ward 1, and Bridget McAndrew, who's been here they've both been here this whole time, Ward 3. I've got an incoming alderman here. We're all willing to sit down with anybody, come to any meeting and answer any questions. We'd love to do it. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody.
And thank you, Janet, for stepping up to do the presentation.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, Andrea, for doing the tech.
Just so Clayton, that